Hey, I feel like I don't know where to say hey anymore. It
So
used to be
I'm
in the
trying
same
to,
spot.
right? Because when you say hey is when I usually fade out the music,
Right.
and my fader was not working today. So I'm like, she said hey, and I can't fade. This is why we need a production tech behind the scenes.
Mm, I like that. I like
How
that.
are you, my friend?
I'm great. Thankful to be here. How are you doing?
I am well and full
Yeah.
and a little frantic, if I'm truly honest.
Right.
And, it feels like there's just a lot right now. Personally, community wise, around the world. So
Yeah.
I know, and a lot of my clients I've been talking to have been feeling this way. Like things are just like, whoa, like, yeah. And,
Definitely
we
with
were having
you.
some pre show conversations with our guest and talking about planets being funky. We'll have to talk about that when we bring her up,
Yeah.
and how things are affecting us. But
Right.
I feel it. It's
Yeah.
like,
No, definitely. Like, what is going on? So many different plates in the air. And what really helps me is what you say, the relationship between holding grief and gratitude. There's both, right? And every day. So, yeah, making
right?
sure you hold on to both. You can't always let go of the grief, but you can definitely be intentional about holding on to the gratitude too.
Absolutely. Welcome, Rebecca. We're glad you're listening to us live today.
Thank you.
Rebecca says, words cannot express how happy I am that this is going on. I need all the wisdom I can get. You and me both, Rebecca.
Yes, I'm with you. Definitely with you on that, Rebecca.
So we should introduce ourselves and get started with the show because we have an amazing guest today that we can't
Yes.
wait to introduce you to.
Yes, and it is the beginning of season 4, so I am so excited.
What?
We
Kicking
are
off
here.
season 4?
Yes, yes, and I am Shannon Mitchell, the owner operator of Shalo Glow LLC, a handmade shea butter company. I'm your advocate for natural skincare and practical business systems.
Hey, y'all, I'm Christine Gautreaux, a white social justice advocate, an author, an international speaker, and your self care and community care activist and advocate. And so
Yes,
glad to be with you today.
yes, and together we are Women Connected in Wisdom, a podcast grounded in the 8 dimensions of wellness.
We get together every week to have intentional conversations about how to be wise in relationships, in life, in business, all of it. We try to cram it all into an hour. It often
Yeah.
doesn't work, but
Yeah, we spread the hours across the months.
right? So, what are we talking about today, my friend?
Ooh, today we are talking about environmental wellness. And this has become one of my favorite ones because it was the category I struggled with the most. I said, okay, outside of getting outside, what else is environmental wellness? And the operation or the definition we operate off of is environmental wellness is having good health by occupying pleasant, stimulating environments that support well being. It promotes interaction with nature and also creating an enjoyable personal environment, both in and out of your workplace.
Right? And we know it's so much more than that, too.
Yeah.
Like, it's all of that. It's where we live, it's where we work, it's where we play.
Mm,
There's so many big things going on in the world today environmentally.
yeah.
Water protectors, protect the fires that are going on across our country. Like the, we're going to talk today. I just, you know me, I get so excited about our guests
I
and
know.
the conversations we're about to have. But we're also going to talk about the impact and intersectionality about environmental justice and racial justice and all that. Like how does this work? How does this
Yeah.
work together for us to be well?
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you
No.
think about your environmental wellness this week, what you thinking about, my friend?
Ooh, I'm definitely thinking about work. So our guests that we're about, I know we keep talking about it. We're always excited about who's coming on. But these articles and resources that she sent us with the statistics are so interesting. And when I think about environment, I definitely think about where I live and work and where I work in general. So with me just starting this new position at Top Golf, I'll go ahead and say it now. I've definitely been thinking about how to have fun at work, which is one of the big things that they stand for, and also doing a great job and making sure that there's a healthy balance of everything that goes into both. And it relates to me in these articles that she sent us talking about how a lot of women start businesses because of the work environment. And I wouldn't say that my last work environment drove me to it, but it definitely helped me be excited to be able to shape my own company and work environment for other people. And, also control how much I make and be able to set a price and set hours. And that definitely is, of course, occupational wellness, but also environmental wellness, So we're right on target with the list of things that we're going to talk about today. What about you?
Well, right now I'm thinking a lot about inside my house
Yeah.
because my youngest is about to transition out and move out to go to college. And I think about our environment, what we're working towards is like, what is her environment going to be like when she gets to her dorm room, And it's exciting and it's fun. And I'm enjoying being intentional with it about this is going to be her environment on the micro level for the next, at least for the next year, right? Because who
Right.
knows where she'll move after that. But, then I expand it to our neighborhood and our community and what's going on. And I've been talking to our city council over the years about like protecting our trees and how do we balance development with the earth and what needs to happen there. And so, and then I expanded out to like the rest of the nation and what is going on with the flooding and the fires. And here in Georgia we've been having a ton of rain, like a
Yeah.
ton, and our rivers are swollen. We're not flooding, thank goodness, but
Yeah.
we've got a ton of rain. And I was on a call this week on one of the classes I teach with folks who are in the desert who would just give anything to have the last 5 days that we had. And it's just such the extremes of what is happening on our planet right now due to climate change. And how, I like to talk about politics. So, like, taking it from that world national, bringing it down to local, what are the things we can do locally? And that's part of the reason our upcoming guest, like what her vision and her husband's vision, she's gonna explain to us about like how we can make a difference locally and what are some of the barriers to that.
Right.
So are you ready? I can't
I
wait to tell
am.
I can't wait to tell our guests who's coming on today. So here, tell our listeners who's coming on today. So y'all, today we are so excited to have with us Dr. Melissa Bird. She is the co-founder of the Mermaid's Garden LLC, based on the concept of radical welcome. The Mermaid's Garden will give our guests the opportunity to engage in sacred connection with themselves, with others, and with the land. Guests can expect an exceptional, intimate setting that includes forest, farm, and streams. Join us, is to experience grounding and healing at the garden. Dr. Bird creates the genius for a new brand of leadership and graceful revolution. Her unique life purpose is to use her talents as a healer and a prophet to help others tap into their intuition so that they can harness their magic. Her words awaken revolutionaries, trailblazers, and powerful innovators in the quest for justice. When she's not building her business, she can be found reading trashy novels, drinking fine whiskey, playing mom to three delicious, I thought it said delusional at first, but they're probably both at some points in their life, delicious humans, and loving her punk rock scientist, James Thomas Kelly. You can get her free book, Natural Born Rebel, and learn how to awaken your inner revolutionary trailblazer and engage in the quest for justice. And you can also connect with her at naturalbornrebel.com. And we will put all those links in our show notes. But first, we're going to welcome her onto our show I'm so excited you're here.
Welcome.
I mean, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Yes. Like, I love this line. Her words awaken revolutionaries, trailblazers, and powerful innovators in the quest for justice.
Yeah.
Will you tell us more about that?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Christine and Shannon, for having me. I'm so happy to be here. I'm Dr. Melissa Bird, and I started out my career as a social worker, so I have a master's degree and a PhD in social work. I hated doing clinical work. I'm a really great life coach because I don't have any rules, but I'm a really crappy clinician because there's too many rules. And so know your strengths. And so when I finished my PhD, I had worked as a lobbyist and an activist for years in Utah. So I worked for Equality Utah and then Planned Parenthood of Utah and did a lot of work in activism. And when I was finishing my PhD in 2017, of course, the election had happened in 2016. And I was like, I do not want to go live in the ivory tower. I don't want to go get a tenure track position at a university. I really want to use all the things I know about breaking down barriers and community organizing and community building. And I want to do something different. And so I started my business. I had no business background. Like I was like, whatever, I'll hire a coach and learn some things and it'll be awesome. And so I started my business doing coaching and I was really focused on helping women develop their voice and figure out what they're passionate about to make a difference in their communities. Because so many of us after the election were like, I don't know what to do, but I got to do something. And so I was really focused on helping women figure out what that was. And then a friend of mine, amazing things happen when you go to the forest in Scotland. I'm just going to say that, first of all, because I went on a retreat in 2017. And that was where I got the vision for the Mermaid's Garden. And it was also where a friend of mine, her name is Susie, she called me randomly in the beginning of 2019 and was like, hey, I just had this vision for you. She had been in Scotland with me at the retreat. And she said, you need to start this thing called Natural Born Rebel. And you need to write this book called Natural Born Rebel. And here's all the stuff that you should put in it. And you need to teach this thing called Rebel School. And here's all the stuff that you should put in it. And I love you, but I got to go. It's like, okay.
Now that's a good friend.
Yeah. And I wrote it all down and I wrote the book. And long story short, that's how Natural Born Rebel was born. And at the same time, of course, I'd had this vision for the Mermaid's Garden for creating a space where people could come to reconnect to themselves and to the land and to their bodies, and also create food where people could eat safe and healthy fish, because our fish, my husband's a marine biologist, and our fish are gross. Like farmed fish is nasty. It's so gross. And the antibiotics, y'all don't even want to know. It's so nasty. The antibiotics and all the mercury and all the stuff that's in our fish. You know, one of our joking taglines was when we were first coming up with stuff was pregnant women eating fish again, because we want to grow fish that pregnant women can eat because it's a good, safe, healthy protein. And what happened was I have this vision for the garden and for creating spaces where people can come on retreat and can heal and can have experiences like I had when I was at the retreat in Scotland. And at the same time, create regenerative and sustainable systems. And I'll get into what those mean in a minute, because people think they know, but they don't. For growing fish and then taking the water from the fish and putting it into a system on the farm. So we're basically creating a system where the water gets cleaned out and reused. So it's almost a completely closed system, which saves, water. Because you just brought it up, Christine, water is a problem.
Right.
And it's becoming more and more of a problem. And here in Oregon, where we live, as you know, at the time of this recording, Oregon is burning and we have the largest wildfire. It's creating its own weather system. And fortunately, unlike last year, we're not getting the smoke because the wind's all blowing to you all in the east.
Right. I was just on the phone with a client earlier today who's in Illinois, and they're getting the smoke. And you and I had checked in before the show, and you said you're okay because of where you're at.
For now.
for now.
For now, we're okay.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, so there's like so many things that, you know, we talk about running businesses, and I love this framework around these 8 different things of wellness, because I think there's so much of this intersectionality, and I think that people want to really address climate change because we're on fire, we're flooding, like all these things are happening. But what I'm really excited about today to talk with y'all is really the gatekeeping and the lack of funding for visions like mine.
So you have encountered some obstacles.
Oh my God.
Because, you know, when I heard about this project, I'm like, this is a fabulous project. Like, this is what everybody's talking about. Like, a way to, you know, grow our own food, a way to be healthy, a way to do farm to table. Tell us, like, how you identify, Melissa, and why this shouldn't be a barrier for you, and talk about then what you've encountered.
So this is so fascinating because I live in Oregon. I was born and raised in Utah. I got my PhD in Southern California, and now I live in Oregon, right? My husband is a disabled veteran with PTSD. So the first thing I thought was, there's money for veterans in agriculture, right? Like, this was my first thought. So I was like, we'll go after that money, no problem. I am Native American. I'm Southern Paiute. I am bisexual, so I put the B back in LGBT. I am a woman. I am, you know, a business owner. I'm an entrepreneur. I actually run 3 different businesses, which I don't know what that makes me, but there it is. I think I'm a glutton for punishment some days. But, you know, I'm a mom. I'm a stepmom. Like, I have all these magical, amazing things that are part of who I am. And I thought, you know, we hear all the time, there's money for women of color. There's money for LGBT people. There's money for women in business. There's money for small farmers. There's money for disabled people. There's money for veterans. And the bottom line at the end of the day is that when you start applying for that money or looking into that money, the gatekeepers go, oh, no, that's too big of a vision. And I'm like, well, it's, I didn't come up with it on my own. Like, it was a thing. Like, it's not like I woke up one day and I was like, I'm going to run an aquaculture farm. What the hell is aquaculture? Like, I don't even know what that is. Now I do. But, you know.
Will you tell our listeners what it is?
Yeah. So what we are talking about doing is what's called a recirculating aquaculture system. So there's a thing called aquaponics, which is basically where you get small ponds, like, that are about the size of maybe a little bit bigger than a kiddie pool. Right? They're like the size of backyard pools, basically. And you grow fish and that thing. What we're talking about is doing a recirculating aquaculture system, which they do in other countries, but they do not do them in the United States. So fish farming is not a system where you recirculate the water and clean out the water and bring it back in. And so what we're talking about is creating a system that uses 95% less water than typical fish farms. And so, like, the engineering firm was out of Canada because the designers are all in Canada. And so what we discovered was that while everybody from governors all the way on down, and sometimes people in Congress from the federal level all the way on down to city and county level, say they want to do things to help the environment and save the earth, they do not. Because there is no money available. And if there is money available, there's no money for innovation. And I think because of my own experience as a lobbyist, I understand what's happening. But I think for most people who really want to start small farms, especially and particularly women of color and queer women, the opportunities to do those sorts of things are being held so tightly. One of my favorite examples of this is that everybody told me, well, you guys are the perfect project for the new and beginning farmer and rancher USDA grant. So I'm like, sweet. And they're like, the call is coming out, be on the call. I'm like, okay. So Shannon and Christine, I go to get on this webinar. There are 356 individual farmers on that webinar for $16 million. So they had cut that grant from $75 million to 16 for the entire country. So they were going to be giving, I think it was 12 people, $200,000 a year. You can't buy land for 200,000. You cannot buy land.
I was
Less
just
than
reading.
$500,000.
I was just reading an article today, and it was about a young gentleman, and I think he was either in Arkansas or he was in another Midwestern state, and a white young man has a degree, and he is having to rent his land because he can't afford to buy land. Right. And so, yeah, it's incredible. So what do you think is the cause of that? And Shannon, did you have a question? Because you look like you were about to say something. Okay.
So, well, I'll tell you, the first cause is white supremacy and legacy farming. So one of the things that we've discovered is the way you get a loan, even to qualify for a loan, there's all these veterans loan programs for veterans who want to do agriculture, but you have to have 3 years of farming experience. So you have to have come from a family of farmers as a veteran, because most veterans don't go and serve our country and get farming experience while they're gone because they're serving our country. And so, Shannon, I love that look on your face right now. It just makes me so happy. So if you are raised in a farm, you don't have 3 years of farming experience. I don't have a farm. I don't have farming experience. That wasn't how I was raised. I have a like my great grandmother had a little small garden farm type thing in Idaho. Like my grandpa, his family were farmers, but I wasn't raised in farming. I was not raised in agriculture. And so if women, especially women of color or people of color, want to become farmers, we're completely and entirely locked out of this system, which, if we go back to the wellness platform, creates a whole nother set of mental health crap that levels on us and on our spirits, that keeps us from being able to live out these big dreams. And then people tell you to go to investors. Well, if you've got a vision of spiritual wellness, connection to the land, decolonizing the land, because when you talk about regenerative, sustainable agriculture, you're talking about legitimately decolonizing land and bringing it back to what it was like before white people came here, then investors, they're like, that is way too innovative, way too risky, and way too out of the box thinking. And I'm going, actually, it's not innovative because people have been doing it for like tens of thousands of years, yo. Right. Here's what blew my mind recently, just since we all talked before. In the last week, I have discovered that folks in England are facing the same exact barriers that my husband and I have identified here in the United States. And the very first thing I thought was, well, of course, it's the colonizers, right? Like, of course, they're having the same barriers to farming in England that we are having here in the United States. And what I really want people to learn and take away from this conversation is we can talk about climate change. We can talk about saving the planet. We can talk about changing farming practices so people like companies like Monsanto aren't driving the reins. We can talk about food and health and all that stuff. But the bottom line at the end of the day, Shannon and Christine and all your listeners, is that if we don't put money and get rid of the gatekeepers and put money into that conversation, we are never going to change the face of how we access food in this country, ever.
Well, and I think that goes back to exactly what you're saying about white supremacy, because who are the gatekeepers?
That's right.
Right?
Yep.
My guess would be the majority of them are white males. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they get to decide which direction.
Yeah.
Right. And when you talk about mental and emotional well-being, Melissa, I think about gut psychology, mm-hmm. And what we know is that the environment, we're talking about environmental wellness, but the environment of your digestive system is directly related to how you think, So if in color and BIPOC population we have nutritional deserts, if I live by a gas station that has bars on the windows and a sheet of plexiglass before coronavirus, I promise you they don't have fresh kale, celery, and beets and radishes in there, you know? So what is the access to fresh food like? We talked about that in our last conversation with our guest that was a nun we had on, and just the assumption that everybody has access to things like these. So if we don't have food that supports a healthy psychology for whole entire groups of people for generations, of course, that's going to affect the way they think, the way they process everything in their life, and therefore all the other dimensions of wellness.
Yeah, Shannon, I'm so glad you said that, because when we talk about food deserts and we talk about regionalizing our food, it goes so far beyond, are we putting apples, bananas, and oranges in the corner gas station to make sure that people have those types of things? It's not even about that. It's about the will of farmers to regionalize our food so that, for example, all of the food here in the Pacific Northwest comes from farms in Washington and Oregon and Northern California. That's how it should be. Because what we've learned in Corona, in the land of COVID, is that we have a supply chain problem. And so safe and healthy and well-grown food, while it is a human right, is not being grown as if it is a human right. And I think it's such an important thing for people to start to be aware of. It's not just about, should I wash these tomatoes, or are they organic and am I okay? It's about who's sitting at the table, who's making the decisions for our collective table, our collective farm table, and who's being left out of the systems of farming and agriculture, who could be shifting the way we think about food. But we have to look at it in this intersectional way, and water is critical to the conversation. And one of the things I'm so glad you're continuing to have these conversations, Shannon, especially about food deserts, because a lot of the students I used to teach when I was down in Los Angeles would do they were social workers, and they would do a lot of research on food deserts, because where the university was located was in the middle of a giant food desert, right? And so I just think we have to start thinking about, how far do people have to go to get their food? And are we growing the food of the people? Right? Because we all eat so differently because of who we are.
Right. And the different cultures and health and everything. It was, this is also at the intersection of gender. Because one of the articles that you sent us that we were looking at was the one about the statistics about farmers, and how many farmers are women and how many farmers are men. And I think about that because we all know on this call, and we're women connected in wisdom. So women think about things often differently, about how, just what you said stuck out to me, Melissa, about what food are we growing? Like, what food are we growing for which culture, for which people? Not just making it one thing, or, yeah.
And what I think about too, and I know we keep talking about these articles, but this, of course, the title is supposed to grab you. This 189 billion gender gap in startup funding, it's really easy to skate over, put your money where your mouth is. And people think that we're just saying, oh, just throw money at it and it should be easy. Like, we don't understand how it works. But I think that if we used let me say it right, aquaculture systems that recirculated water, that would probably save some money that we're using to get water to the systems that we're using. And then we could put some of that money for women and women of color to be farmers. And there's ways to move stuff around. But because of the way we choose to spend the money, and the fact that there's a gap, and the question is why, that's what I'm looking at, and especially because, one, what we know is that because women usually are taught not to use their voices often, we apply ourselves less. right? So I love the other article that says that even though women start businesses less often, they're just as successful. Because guess what? To sign my name on a document, it doesn't matter if I'm male or female. I can use my hand and make sure that my paperwork is taken care of. But if I, as a woman, am paid less, then I have less personal capital to start the business. Therefore, am more likely to need funding. And then if there's a gap of $189 billion, well, this is what we're talking about. So I love that you sent us these resources and how everything ties in one another.
And
Yeah,
real
because we assume that there's startup funding for things like this, right? Like we just make assumptions about when a woman wants to go into a business, or a disabled veteran wants to go into a business, or a person of color wants to go into a business, that they can just apply for these small business loans and then they get handed this magical, amazing money. Oh, hell no. I can't tell you how many bankers have said to me, well, honey,
oh,
you could just crowdfund for that. And I'm all, no, give me a $500,000 loan, yo. Well, have you worked with the Small Business Development Center? Yep, I have a mentor. Here's my 4-year projections. I mean, we played all the games. We followed all the rules. And now I'm just like, forget about it. And if I hear one more time that I should just be able to go to an investor and get a 15% interest loan for what I want to do, when I know full well, if I sent my white straight husband into the bank looking a little more army than he usually does, he'd get a loan in 5 seconds. And I got to tell you, I'm actually thinking I might do that experiment coming up soon, because I'm just so sick and tired of hearing, well, honey, you can just go crowdfund for all that money. No, I'm not going to crowdfund. I mean, I don't mind crowdfunding. And we have a great shop on our website at themermaidsgarden.oregon.com. But, when we think about agriculture and we think about farming, the average age in the United States of a farmer is 70 years old. The average age of a farmer in Oregon is 60 years old. And they're mostly men, like majority men. They're getting old. But here's something that just came into my head as I was listening to you both. When we called Farm Aid, because I was like, well, maybe Farm Aid will give us a grant, right? Like maybe we could get some money from Farm Aid. The first thing on their recording is, if you are having suicidal thoughts, please hang up and call this number and make sure to leave us a message so that we can get back to you as soon as possible. The numbers of suicides among farmers, because of the way we do lending in this country, and because of these big corporations, these big corporate farmers taking over, it would horrify it should horrify all of us, that the first thing you hear when you call Farm Aid is this message about suicide. And if you're in crisis, please leave a message and also call 911. We don't think about farmers that way.
No.
But that is the reality of farming in the United States of America. And so when we talk about environmental wellness, it goes so far beyond the flooding and the fires and the hurricanes and the weather. This is about disrupting and dismantling this entire system so that we can start growing food the way we were put here to grow food, and start distributing food the way that makes sense regionally. Because I can tell you right now, you all don't eat the same foods in your parts of the world that I do here in the Pacific Northwest. Everything, we have to start looking at this in such an intersectional way, and we have to stop assuming that the money is going to the people that we think are deserving of the money, that are trying to help with climate change, that are trying to help save our land, that are trying to help create innovative ways for us to think about our food and where it comes from. And, you see those bougie farm to table pictures on Instagram and, on Pinterest, and think, oh, I think it's so lovely that that's happening. That's only happening if you have a boat ton of money.
Right. I wanted to say to your thing about crowdfunding, Melissa, is that do you know one of the number one trending articles right now on LinkedIn?
Mm-mm.
It's about throwing a startup party instead of a baby shower party.
Right.
And it is about startup businesses. And I'm sure it was for women because like it just made me think about it when you were talking about, oh, honey, crowdsourced. And when they're comparing throwing a startup party to throwing a baby shower party instead, like it just totally and what that does in a system like this, when people say, oh, it's not systemic. Well, yeah, it is when you put the onus on the most disenfranchised groups that they're responsible for it all.
You know, the other thing that people keep saying to me is, well, why don't you just start a nonprofit? Well, why can't I just have a damn corporation like every other man in America? And I don't have to start no damn nonprofit. I've been working in nonprofits for 20 effing years. I don't need another nonprofit in my life, people. That's a whole complex in and of itself. I want a corporation. I'm a businesswoman. I've been running a very successful business for the last 4 years, and I don't intend on stopping anytime soon. This is an expansion on my business. No man will go to another man and be like, whoa, dude, that vision, you ought to break that up a little bit. That's too big. I mean, it's not like someone went up to Ford and was like, dude, I don't know about this automatic car thing. I think we should stick to horses and buggies. Nobody said that to him. Nobody says that to Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and all. I mean, nobody told Steve Jobs, yo, that Apple thing, I don't know what you're thinking. I mean, someone did say, what are you thinking? But once he got that thing off the ground, nobody said, dude, your vision's too big. No one's going to hold a computer in their hand. No, nobody said, but we say it to women all the damn time. All the time. And when you're a woman of color, you best believe you're hearing that 10 times more. How dare you? People have said to me, how dare you think this big? Oh, hello, American Dream.
Right.
I don't get that. I don't get a piece of that.
I'm so glad you're daring. I am so glad you are daring to dream that big and share your vision with folks. Like, so how can people find you? How can they support you? How can they help you? Like, if
hold on, before I go there, Shannon, did you have something you wanted to add to that? Because I can tell you're like,
no, I guess I will say yes, actually. I love it. I love your feistiness and how you bring it out of people with all the amazing things we read in the bio. I can definitely see it. And I felt the energy when we first talked. But I think it's really important. I think, and when I say it, I mean how we think about women. I think that it's a conversation I have with a lot of my guy friends, reminding them about their privilege. We forget that we still treat women like children. I am not a child. I have a degree. I'm not stupid. And not that not having a degree means that you're not stupid and that having one means that you aren't. Okay. That's not what we're saying. But I shouldn't have to validate every statement that I make. And, even a few decades ago, women weren't able to have credit. A few decades ago, if I wanted to start a business, I would have needed a man to co-sign the papers for me to even be able to do this, So it's definitely trailblazing to be having these conversations. And I think that a lot of it goes to subconscious bias. They don't realize that you don't realize you think of me as a child. I'm a very competent woman who can put a sentence together, So I hear what you're saying about continuing to hold space for yourself, even in the face of people telling you that you shouldn't. And I was going to bring that up, the pigeonholing into nonprofit, because to me, it reminds me of how we pigeonhole certain students into certain lanes, into certain avenues, and automatically assuming that they won't pass the test or that's not where their life is going. I was just watching this Netflix series over the weekend about money and why things are the way that they are. And it was talking about the game of life and how in the game of life, you choose to either start a career or what is it, to like start a family, something like that.
Yes, but you go to college or you have a career.
Yes, thank you. College or career. It was a 2 C's. So what about The corporations, what about the business? And that's exactly the same question I was asking for Corona. You know, we're talking about unemployment, how many people aren't working jobs, and how the workforce is going. What about the people who build the workforce? That is also information for the general public because small businesses make up so much of the market. But what is the market? What does that look like? What are the details of how to have a healthy market? And because women support the nation and the world in rearing children and managing the households, we are also a very integral part of that conversation too. And if a few of us plan on being billionaires and taking up some of this $189 billion gender gap, then so be it. You know?
Yeah, and I wanna say to Rebecca, who just posted that comment about being next to a land grant university, I live 3 blocks from Oregon State University, which is the largest land grant institution in the state of Oregon. And their workshops for startup farmers are great, and their grants for farm to table are awesome. And the money is so limited that there are people at the university who have said, that's really great. Good luck. Good luck. So I've been to all, I mean, I have been part of every single thing that is offered in this country when it comes to starting a farm. And it goes all the way back to the beginning of our conversation. If you do not have 3 years of experience, which translate to my great grandpa, my great grandpa, my great grandpa, my grandpa, and my dad were all farmers. And I say that on purpose because that is the history of farming in this country. And so, and also, the other little insidious layer to this when it comes to startup funding and funding for farming and retreats, like what we are talking about doing, is that in banking, to get a commercial loan for like a commercial farm, which is what we would be considered, you can't live on the property. To get a VA home loan, you have to have a house and have comps on the property. Well, if you're talking about a 50-acre piece of farmland with a house that was built in 1862, when the land was acquired, you don't have comps for a home loan. So we have to, the way the system is set up, and I actually think this is why a lot of farmers are going bankrupt, because you're not allowed to live on the property. Well, what the hell are you supposed to do? Like leave the land your family's owned for 250 years because they stole it from the Native Americans back when they came to Oregon? You're not going to leave that property. You're going to end up bankrupt because you can't get a commercial loan for your farm because you're not supposed to live there. And so this whole thing is so much more insidious. And this is really why I wanted to talk about it with y'all. Because when we talk about women in business and we talk about women's wisdom in wellness, we have to talk about understanding the system within which we are playing. And Shannon, I'm so glad you brought up that $182 billion deficit in startup funding that's available to men versus women. I mean, this is such a meaty onion to peel apart, right? And so when you are, what I really want to encourage listeners to understand is when we start talking about growing our own food, raising our own crops, knowing where our meat is coming from, having an amazing vision to reconnect people to themselves and to the land and to their bodies. And I'm not just talking able-bodied people. Our vision is to create a retreat space where people can, it's based on the idea of universal design. So everybody, regardless of ability, will be able to come and be at that space. So like the labyrinth is going to be wide enough for wheelchairs and walkers and have bumpers for blind people who use canes, because right now most labyrinths are gravel and they're all natural. Well, that's crap, because people who have disabilities aren't able to use them. The other thing to think about when we think about environmental wellness and farming and where our food comes from is we're talking about rural economic development. There's a huge push right now in the country to engage in rural economic development, and there's billions of dollars out there for that. But I can't tell you how shocking it was to meet with our county elected officials and say, we want to do this. We want you to help us get this money from the USDA and make this happen, because we have to employ people on a 24-hour cycle, because if you get one dead fish at 3:00 in the morning, all the fish go away. And they were like, whoa, you mean you're going to be employing like dozens of people? And I was like, yeah. And my hope is that most of them are Black, Indigenous, people of color, and disabled veterans. That's really what we're trying to do here, is create opportunities, research opportunities with the land grant university for first generation students to be able to come in and research regenerative farming and forestry. We've connected with all the right people at the land grant university, and we need land and we need infrastructure money. And if we looked traditional, we'd have that money. I guarantee it. So you asked how people can find us, and you've put our website up, which is awesome. We are on Instagram at Mermaid's Garden, Oregon. And we have a really great shop. We've partnered with a bunch of mom-owned businesses. So we have candles and sweatshirts and t-shirts and beeswax wraps for lunches and like food. So, oh my God, the beeswax wraps are so amazing. They're mermaids. And then we have an artist who is a Pacific Northwest artist who makes mermaids that you can hang in your windows that have pressed flowers in them. They're so beautiful, y'all. And those are all on our website. And the other thing you can do, and you can find me at birdgirl1001 on all the socials, and at naturalbornrebel.com. But here's what I would really love for everyone to do. I would love for everyone, when your friends are talking about, oh, everything's on fire, oh my God, we got to save the planet, I would love for all of you to ask people if they know where their food's coming from. And talk to people about, if they do know where their food's coming from, how are those people who are growing that food and processing that food and putting that food in our grocery stores, how are they getting connected to the people in their communities? And so when you go to the farmers markets, go and find, we are on Facebook at the Mermaid's Garden, Oregon, and birdgirl1001. So yeah, absolutely. Go to the farmers markets and buy your food there if you have them. And then if you live in a food desert, there is a lot of work being done to figure out how to bring food into those deserts and do more research and have a greater understanding on what a food desert is and why it exists, racism, and how we can start to work towards disrupting that system of keeping food from people.
Right. We do every week, Melissa, Dr. Bird, we do a hashtag wisdom in action. Mm-hmm. And you just gave folks about 4 wisdom in actions. I love that. Because if you don't know what a food desert is this is the first time you've heard about it, please go research that and understand what that's about, because it is about racism and it's about redistricting. It's about all kinds of things where intersections converge. And, Melissa, you and I share social work as our background, and I'm a firm believer it's about policy. It's about policy change, because that's what builds our systems. Yep. So also check with your local governments. Like, what are their policies about farms and farmlets and growing your own food, or being allowed to have chickens in your yard? Because so many places you're not allowed to have chickens in your yard. Mm-hmm. And so check that out, because it impacts all of us.
And remember, if you know people who are like, I just want to start a farm. So let me tell you, if you're looking for land with water rights, that takes your ability. Like, we're looking for 25 to 50 acres of land. And so that takes us, and we need water rights. So that takes you from buying a $400,000 piece of land with a well on it to $1.5 to $2 million for land, just for land. And so when we talk about, and by the way, that is recent, that's the same things that's happening to regular housing in urban areas is happening in rural areas with land. And so really being aware of the gatekeeping and the barriers to why these problems aren't being solved right away. And it is all about policy. It's 100% all about policy. And there are ways you can go to city and county governments to really help address those policies and make a difference in policy. I mean, that's what I've been doing for a really long time. And it's finally starting to move and shift and make a difference. But it takes a long time. And I think some people get frustrated when they don't have access to money and they just give up.
Understandable, because they're trying to feed their families and they're trying to, put gas in their car.
Yeah.
And Shannon, you want to come on and talk about your wisdom in action this week? Because I know we're almost out of time. Yeah.
Yes, my wisdom in action is looking up more on food deserts. When I think about food deserts, it does go to the gas stations, the neighborhoods who don't have the food, and what that menu looks like for the week, for the month. I do go to farmers markets, love farmers markets, but if I'm missing information on exactly the specifics of food deserts and I'm off target, I look forward to, seeing what information comes up so that I could be better informed.
Yeah, my wisdom in action this week. I'm going to check out with my local government, and because I like to write to my representatives or talk to them and find out policies that we need to really look at through the lens of social justice, because I believe that if we start speaking out, that we can all make a difference. But we have to know, like you said, Melissa, about you can't live on the land. Like, in all transparency, like, I come from farmers, but they've always lived on the land. They're not commercial farmers. They're more farmland. They're more, my dad has, I think he's at 12 acres or 14 acres, and he grows his own food and feeds the neighborhood and goes to the farmer's market. And my grandfather comes from, he retired to farm 50 acres.
Right.
So I would probably qualify for the grant because I would be third generation and I'm white. And so some of those barriers would be taken care of, but I would have to buy whole new land and not live on it. So that was fascinating to me to learn that. And
if you want a commercial loan to run a business, if you want a business loan,
right,
to run a business, you can't live on the property.
Right. And so some of that, we need shifts in culture around that, and we need shifts in policy. So thank you so much for your wisdom and for being willing to share with us your experience, because I see your strength and your tenacity and your all that it has taken to get you to this point so far. And I want to honor that. And I want to also I want to see this coming true for you. Because
it's coming.
I would love to come to the Mermaid's Garden and retreat there and have fresh fish that was grown on the property and know that the land and the air and the water are being taken care of in a sustainable way, and that all are welcome. I have a labyrinth. Our listeners hear me talk about it. It's not accessible, because we're in the kind of foothills of the Appalachian. Like, we're not in the mountains and we're barely in the foothills, but we got a lot of hills. So, and it is natural, and it goes between the trees. And sometimes you got to kind of hand onto a tree to get up to the next part. Yeah. So yeah, I hear you when you say that about making it accessible for all. And I am so grateful for the work you do in the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us. We're going to pop you back in the green room, and we're going to wrap up this show. And we look forward to talking to you more. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, y'all.
Of course.
There's so much in that yummy conversation. I don't even know where to start. Right?
Well, I will start us off. I love the part of what stood out to me, of course, is always all of it. But the reconnecting to your body. That's how I lost all this weight. It was actually me working on my spiritual wellness. I said, you know what? I'm committed to these businesses. I'm committed to these guys that I date, and people do what they want to do. So let me be committed to God, because He is faithful. And I did the Daniel's fast, which made me cut out a lot of food. And I had an accountability partner, one of my kitchen managers at work. Shout out to Chiron. And he said, my church challenged me to do 100 days. I said, I'm not doing 100 days Daniel's fast, okay? But I will do vegan. And it was so difficult to find food without meat, bread, or cheese. And I get that some people eat that, but why does it have to be in everything? What is going on with what's available? Who eats what? And by me being more committed to myself, being more committed to my body and what I chose to eat, it's connected me to every other dimension of wellness in a real genuine way, in a way that can be balanced and healthy. And even if I got connected to another part first, if I'm not healthy and I'm in the hospital, everything else deteriorates, you know? So I
Right.
definitely heard her when she said, come out here to nature and get reconnected. That's where we come from.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. The so much of that conversation, the passion and the really the intersectionality and talking about how systems of oppression keep us from really healthy, amazing things. And I was struck by the regional part of the growing because, like I said, I was raised by farmers, and it is different because I'm originally from Texas, and then we moved here to Georgia, and that was kind of one of the first things I noticed is like what was available and not at the farmers market, because we grew up farm to table before that was even a term, because we grew our own food, and that's how we went fishing for our meat, our protein source for the 6 months or whatever. And so yeah, I think, and the other thing that really stuck out to me is Dr. Bird saying, get involved, let your voice be heard.
Yeah.
We've got to change the policy, but first we have to know, we have to educate ourselves. And that's why I love this podcast, Shannon, and that we have these guests on that, like, I hadn't thought about some of this stuff before.
No, they are why. And that's what I love about being connected. I don't know. I would be surprised if ever in my lifetime I found myself to be a farmer. I would be surprised. I didn't know I was going to have a podcast, so it might happen. Who knows? Maybe after I retire, like your dad, I'll go do farming. Who knows? Maybe the 3-year pre-mandated time will be lifted by then, but somebody has to do it because I shop at the farmer's market. So our
Right.
strengths covering each other's weaknesses or the areas that we're not passionate about, covering our purposes together. I love it. And yeah, I've definitely had a lot of enlightenment and perspective shifts that I wouldn't have had we not talked to these wise women.
Right. I am so grateful. So grateful. So we should tell our listeners what you're up to over at Shalo Glow. What's going on over there?
Yes. So, ladies, if you are avid listeners to our show, you know that Shalo Glow now has a subscription, right? We're talking about what you put in your body when we're talking about environmental wellness, but it's also about what you put on your body. Your skin is the biggest organ on your body. So if you're not protecting it, not taking care of it, it's just kind of letting all the dirt and different things that are out in the environment directly into your skin on top of not maintaining it. When we talk about wellness, so that we know we have the information like we're talking about specifically, but also to maintain it. There's one thing to get there, but we have to maintain it. So if you are interested in a subscription, go over to shaloglow.com. We have the Wise Five for you ladies. It's only for our listeners. And gentlemen, if you're on here too, it's not going to stop you from typing in the Wise Five. So you will get that for being our listeners. Shout out to Joe. He's one of our avid listeners. And that way you can make sure that we're staying on top of it as we think of the other categories of wellness. And if you're that type of person that not only thinks about yourself, but also the other women in your community who make a difference in your life and the life of those around you, we do give the gift of self-care to Shay Rose. And again, that's somebody in the community who's making a difference. So if you know a person who might not always prioritize herself, you can nominate her to a free gift. I will take care of it for you. And you can do that by emailing my Shayro to shaloglow@gmail.com. And she will be in the nomination until the end of this month. It is the 21st. Until the end of the month, we have the nomination open, and we will announce the next honoree at the end of the month.
I love it. Thank you so much. We love that Shalo Glow is our sponsor and takes care of the women in our lives and the men, because they love the product too. So it's a good reminder. Well, my friends, that hour went by quick.
It did. It did. And we're already at the end of the first show for season 4. Who would have thought it?
Y'all, we have some great guests lined up for this season. So
Yeah,
we
we
look
do.
forward. We hope you will join us. We go live at 5 every Wednesday. You can, about 24 hours later, our latest episode is up on all the platforms where you can find podcasts. We really would love it if you would like and subscribe, because that helps us out. And tell your friends about us. So,
Yes. And in the meantime, ladies, be well, be wise, be whole. We will see you next week, Wednesday at 5.
looking forward to it.
Yes.